How many of you grew up wanting to be a drummer, sitting there in the garage, perhaps hitting on the barrels that you can find? Well, Neil Peart, who was the drummer for Rush, did that. I think you started when you were about 13.
Exactly, yes.
And your parents said that was all right, or they just didn't know what it was going to lead to?
Well, ironically, it started just as you described, with me banging around in pots and pans, and my baby sister's playpen with chopsticks that they got from the Chinese takeout, you know, and they gave me drum lessons for my 13th birthday, so it must have been obvious that I like to hit things with sticks, so they wanted to see.
Better they be drums.
Are you serious? Let's see if you're serious. So
Neil Peart is the drummer, of course, with Rush. 30 million albums sold. It is quite incredible, over 22 years. This is a fixture on the Canadian landscape. Do you have any understanding why?
No, it's an
I mean,
often
of course
asked...
you're talented and good, but...
Well, no, obviously we know that's not enough, even were it true. But it's an often asked question, and one which no one knows the real answer. If they did, they would bottle it and sell it to all aspiring young musicians. But obviously we're glad that it's so, but you can't get together with 3 people and say, well, we want to have a career spanning over 20 years and have a really loyal audience.
And here's the plan.
Yeah, here's the plan. So we just did what we thought was right, made music that we liked, and hoped that other people would too, and so far that's been the secret formula.
One of the other things that Neil does, beyond drumming, of course, is that he engages in adventure travel. And this is not getting on an airplane and going some exotic place. This is traveling through the wilds of Africa on a bicycle. And he has just written a book entitled The Masked Rider, Cycling in West Africa. And that is really, I mean, it's an interesting insight into your mind and how your head works. In the first place, why would you do this?
A chain of interests really led to it. I started to get interested in bicycling. And I went to China, I guess in '85 was my very first bicycle tour. And I signed up with this company and just went off with a group of strangers. And it was obviously China had just been opened to the West about a year before. So it was very new and it was very rough. And I got really sick and all the things that are supposed to happen. But I also really liked it. I liked seeing people at home and seeing what China was really like. And now China is a place in my memory rather than an abstraction in my imagination.
You talk about the bicycle being sort of an instrument that moves at people's speed.
Right, and that's an important part of it too. As you travel through a village, you can exchange greetings, you can hear them talking, you can watch them interacting in the market or whatever, and yet you can still move on through a procession of territory through the day, through the landscapes, through the villages. All of that comes at you in a panorama, but it's also a human speed of your ability to assimilate it and observe it. So that part's nice. You can travel with a little tape recorder and you can pull it out and talk to it while you're riding a bicycle.
And do you?
That's true.
And is that where the notes for the book came from?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of the observations, or if I'm thinking about the book I was reading last night before I fell asleep, I'll do a little soliloquy, if the roads allow. And it's one thing I noticed that sometimes when the roads are too bad, obviously you just can't take your hands off the bars. And I listen to myself on the tapes as I transcribe them sometimes, and I'm holding on for dear life and panting away as I climb up a hill. This is really horrible, you know, I'm dying of thirst. And they're really dramatic little moments.
Is it one of those things when you come home you say, why the hell did I do that? I don't think I'm going to do it again. And then, of course, you do? No,
you ask yourself in the middle of the journey, why am I doing this? Because when you are in some, you know, little back room of a brothel, staying in a so-called hotel in Cameroon, and you've got dysentery and you're running for some stenching cubicle in the back, you know, and eating rice with sand in it and trying to use your little filter pump to clean enough water to drink. And you get to homesick and you get depressed and you really want to just go to the fridge and get an apple juice, you know, simple things that you can do at home. And that's when you tend to get depressed and bring out those kind of questions. When I'm on my way home or at home, I just feel so at peace and so cleansed of having all my false values removed and brought down to those basics of worrying about a bowl of rice and clean water to drink. It's really good for modern people to reduce themselves, I think, to that level of existence. And also I feel all of the things that had been troubling me before. I noticed on the last trip I took, for instance, I was really stressed about a lot of decisions I had to make, big projects going on with the band and with my own life, and this book being one of them at the time, ironically. And I was just stressed to the max, and I went off, and I was 1 week into the trip, and I realized not only did I not feel that stress anymore, I couldn't even remember what I was stressed about, because that kind of traveling, just keeping going, is such an effort. You know, just keeping, today I'm going to try to get from here to there. If you can accomplish that, that's a major accomplishment. There are so many obstacles in your way, especially when you're traveling in any kind of undeveloped country, so it cleanses you.
Is it about confronting your own limitations, your own fears as well? I mean, some of these things sound like they might have been dangerous.
That is part of it, and I go off on these trips hoping that I survive. You know, I always remember on the African trips or any of the more adventurous travels that I've done, that's in my mind when I go, God, I hope I come home again, because there are so many things that can happen to you. But it isn't like directly confronting a phobia or something.
Yeah.
It's just, this is where I really want to go here. I'm curious about these people. I'm curious about these places. It's a genuine drive to really want to go there.
You write very eloquently about being the stranger. I mean, wherever you go here, I'm sure you're recognized, you're famous, you perform on stage. There you are, you're one of a handful of people who may be from other parts of the world. They don't know necessarily
No,
who
never.
Neil Peart is.
I really love that part of it too. I mean, I treasure anonymity. As anyone who wants to write or do anything observational about life, you've got to be able to observe. You can't be the observed. And I've heard of other writers who have achieved prominence really resenting and regretting that fact, because it takes them out of the context that they work in. You know, you work as the observer, and you want to be able to watch people behave and then think about why and try to put it in words. And a lot of times the mechanics of celebrity can take that away from you, and you do resent it. Whereas in any of these places, I am completely unknown. And I love that anonymity. I love people, and I'm drawn to all these people, or all these places for the people, for the cultures. So that's a big part of it. You know, a lot of people say, well, do you want to go to Antarctica? I think, well, it'd be interesting, but there aren't any people there.
Yeah.
And they find that a strange answer, because I am perhaps perceived as antisocial, but I'm not at all. I love to go there under those terms.
That notion of stepping out of the public image, the context in which we all know each other and ourselves to a certain extent, does it give you another take on yourself?
Hopefully that's part of the ideal, certainly, and one of the reasons for the title, The Masked Rider, is that I was aware that I have my masks, and for whatever different kind of situation I find myself in, there might be a different persona to wear. And in a situation like this, you're thrown among strangers. All the people I traveled with I hadn't met before, among our little group of 5 cyclists, and of course all the people that I encounter every day, I encounter as a stranger, just as they are strangers to me. And when you're traveling under such difficult circumstances, of course, there's no room anymore for pretensions, even among the people that you're traveling with.
So even if you say, I'm going to kind of adopt this persona, I think I'm going to be the writer, the thinker, it doesn't last.
No, I tried. In fact, on this particular trip, I decided early on I was going to be relaxed. And there was an older lady traveling on the trip, and I thought, okay, we're going to have to slow down for her. I want to be like that. I don't want to be driven. I don't want to be urgent. I don't want to worry about getting to the destination. I just want to be calm. I'll ride at the back of the group. And I made this decision. Of course, well, you can't. You can't fundamentally change yourself, but you can put aside the context, you know, and I do certainly live in a privileged kind of life where a lot of what I want done can be done for me and so on, but it's good to take yourself out of that, so nobody else is going to go get you water. Nobody else is going to get you a bowl of rice. You know, you have to worry about and solve those problems yourself.
Do you still ride your bicycle between shows, different venues, different cities when Rush is performing?
It became a great way to escape the mechanics of touring again, where I'd go out just as an anonymous figure on a bicycle, and the bus would go off with the rest of the band to the next city. And if it's around 100 miles or so with a day off, I could do it.
Obviously, you're not touring in Canada in the winter.
Exactly, yeah. There are certain limitations, but it just got me around cities for the first time. After 20 years of touring around the United States and Canada, obviously, you travel at night all the time, so you don't really see anything. You don't meet any real people, and no one who you can approach as a stranger. You know, everyone that comes up to you thinks they want something from you or thinks they know you or something, where when you're a goof on a bicycle, you're innocent, you know, and I can be in the middle of Harlem, or I can be in a small town in Ohio and stop in the local diner and listen to the farmers talk, and those are the moments that real life is made out of, and again, as a writer, that you need.
Because you're not getting off the bus with the entourage. Yeah. Neil Peart is our guest tonight. He has just written The Masked Rider, which will be available any day now, and the latest album by Rush, just out as well, entitled Test for Echo. We'll talk about that a little bit later, too, because Neil Peart writes most of the lyrics for the group Rush. Neil Peart, drummer. The band is Rush. You probably know that. He's also now not only an adventure traveler, but an adventure traveler writer. And his new book is entitled The Masked Rider, Cycling in West Africa. What was the siren call, as you describe it? I think of drums, obviously.
Right, and in fact, it was wildlife. Long before I knew what drums were, really, I was interested in birds and animals. And probably my 7-year-old ambition was to be a bird watcher. So I had that lure, and nature shows all my life have been a real fascination on TV. So the Serengeti in East Africa. The year after I went to China, I went to East Africa and did a kind of a camping back of a truck tour around East Africa, Tanzania, and Kenya, and then did the Kilimanjaro climb. And when I was there, I was introduced to a little bit of the culture of the Samburu and the Maasai and the other local people, Kikuyu of East Africa. I got really intrigued by that, and people, old Africa hands would tell me, well, you come to East Africa for the animals, to West Africa for the people. And so the next year I tried really hard to find a way to get to West Africa and experience some of that. And I knew, by then, of course, having been a drummer, I knew that countries like Ghana were the heart of the rhythmic foundation of Western music, really, is where it all sprang. So that intrigued me as well.
That was the pull.
Being able to try
Did you just toss off mere moments ago that you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro?
Yeah.
You did, like to the top?
Yeah, to the very top.
Now that takes an awful lot of preparation and training. You have to be in...
Well, no, it's actually quite well organized and probably
Really?
sounds more impressive than it is. There are people going up it every day, and there's no technical ropes and hanging from pythons or anything like that every day. They have, it's a long hike. I think it's about a 60-mile hike you do in 5 days. And in the altitude alone, it's 19,000 and some odd feet. So altitude sickness is what turns most people back.
When you talk about the African people, I'm assuming you don't have the language, or do you?
Well, French is the lingua franca of a lot of West Africa, fortunately.
So you've got enough to communicate.
That's what we call survival French.
You write about this wonderful story where you're listening, I think it was in Gambia, where you hear some drums. There's an old African man, I think, sitting around playing drums, and there's a white missionary there who has no rhythm.
None at all. And it was a beautiful moment walking through a village in the Gambia, just sunset, and of course no sound anywhere, just the village settling into evening silence. And I heard the sound of a drum, and I went to the compound and kind of peeked in, and a woman motioned me to go ahead. And inside was the master drummer of the village with a young Irish missionary from a local mission. And he was like holding his hand, trying to get him to do it, trying to get him to play a beat, and he just couldn't. So finally I'm sitting there watching it, and he passes the drum to me. I think he just got frustrated, you know. And I started playing, and we started going, the two of us, and then there were children climbed into the hut, and all the women came in, and everyone was dancing, and the two of us are feeding off each other's rhythm and building it and building it. And it was just a beautiful musical event. And this missionary kid sitting there at the end, he says, "How can you do that?" And I said, "I'm in the business."
And you have rhythm. I mean, you've always known that, though.
There is an inbuilt thing, and it's a really strange thing because it's not coordination. Like, I'm very unathletic. I can't play any sport well or any game. And it's a kind of discoordination that I can separate all my limbs, and I can tell this hand, okay, you go there and do that, and this hand, you stay here and do this, and this foot do this, and I can separate them all. So it is truly a kind of discoordination of the limbs.
But in one sense, you also describe drumming as a very athletic endeavor. I mean, it takes a lot of power.
Stamina.
It takes a lot of stamina and energy.
That's like cycling. The only sports I've ever been able to do: cycling, long distance swimming, cross country skiing, things where you just get into a rhythmic flow and go. You know, and they came right out of drumming or stamina that drumming gave me. I never did any of those things as a kid, and then I found out the first time I tried them, hey, I can do this.
You described the story of lying in bed one night when you're a kid, 13 or 14, whatever it is, listening to this song, Chains.
Oh, yeah.
By a girl group.
Right.
I think the Beatles did it, though, too, on their first album. Didn't they?
Yeah,
The White and Pink one?
they certainly did it. Maybe a B-side of a single or something.
Wait, is it the song like Chains, My Baby's Got Me?
And it was the rhythm of that shuffle rhythm that grabbed me and just cemented it into my brain. It's one of my earliest memories of a popular song really grabbing me in a physical way.
And you responded to the drum sound,
rhythm,
not to the lyric.
But they're all woven together. I don't think you can separate them. If I'd heard a drum machine going, it wouldn't have worked. It had to be the melody, the sound of those girls' voices, the production of the whole thing sonically, from guitars, keyboards, horns, drums, everything, all of it together, and then the rhythm under that. It's a holistic thing.
You said of that moment that your hormones attached themselves to music.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes to, too, you know.
Is it that? Is there kind of a, I don't know, I mean, a sexual energy that comes with that? Rock and roll, particularly, is considered.
Well, yeah, it's considered semantically. That's where the name rock and roll comes from, that it was black slang for the act of sex. So I think that it is often overtly, or, implicitly, certainly, about sex. And at that age, what isn't?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. It's very male. Like most of the people that listen to Rush today, I mean, I don't know, the audiences are mostly male?
The higher proportion, but that's just a stylistic thing, really. Of course, other styles of music. I took my daughter years ago to see New Kids on the Block, and how many men do you think were there?
Yeah,
It's a stylistic thing of what's given forth in the music, and if it tends to be aggressive, it tends to be male, and if it tends to be reflective or romantic, it tends to be female. And these are not generalizations, these are observations of look at the audience.
Do you have a sense that you can go on being a rock drummer forever? We're contemporaries, so I get to ask this question
Yeah, fair
about
enough.
age.
And yeah, I just have to look around to all the other drummers that have, you know, gone before, and people like Buddy Rich until his dying day was really still playing. And when he was crippled by a stroke and was paralyzed half down his body, people who were there tell me that he would hold one foot and one hand and go, I can still do it, I can still do it. You know, you never give up. And because it's stamina, that's the gift. That's a gift of maturity. You know, fortunately, that's not given to you.
I mean, I find young women coming up to me these days saying, I've watched you on television since I was a girl. And once you get over that initial shock,
Yes.
somebody having spent 20 years sort of watching you, you realize that we are now doing all of what we do for much longer. To me, I don't know, Rush, it's heavy metal, you know, it's a serious rock band. Can you keep doing it when you're 60?
As long as we want to, I think. I mean, we certainly get a lot of joy out of working together, and it's the interplay among us that feeds it. It's not the desire to go out and be admired in front of an audience at all. That would never sustain us this long, and it would never sustain us in any deeper, nourishing way. But it's the true ensemble of the three of us together that makes it last, and that makes it a joy to get together and write songs.
And as the boomers age, we will continue to want to keep those things that we've always listened to.
Well, no one can predict that. That's why I was saying earlier, no one can say why this band has lasted so long, because we couldn't plan that. We couldn't say that our music will still grow and absorb other influences and still be relevant 20 years from now. And even this time, after going away and writing a book and making a big band tribute album and doing other things, I came back thinking, can I really sit down and write lyrics for rock songs now? And of course you doubt. And every songwriter
But apparently you did.
Well, apparently I did, yeah.
Test for Echo is the latest Rush album. It has just been released, and The Masked Rider is the title of Neil Peart's new book. We'll continue our discussion about all of those things right after this break. The Masked Rider, that would have been Neil Peart in Western Africa on your bicycle consuming this. You talk about those who travel for pleasure and find adventure, and those who travel for adventure and find pleasure.
Maybe.
Maybe. And what you like to do is think about it, anticipate it beforehand, savor it after the fact.
Yeah, it's one of the lures. I think I was saying before, the real draw is curiosity. And when I think about a country like Mali or a country like Cameroon or Mexico or Tunisia, any of them, I really want to go there. I really want to see what it's like. And then you get all excited about planning it and where you can go and what it'll be like. But then the actual living on a day-to-day basis can be pretty uncomfortable. If you're traveling by bicycle or doing any of the things, if you're traveling by bus, there are no guided tours to these places. There are no air-conditioned buses. There is no other way to get there but the hard way. So you have to face that as being the price of admission. That's the ticket that you're going to have to buy to get there. But day by day, you know, you can have dysentery, you can be homesick, you can be out of water. All kinds of really unpleasant things on an existential basis can really mess up your mood. So that isn't always a pleasurable way to pass your moments. But at the end of it, again, when it's over and you're on the way home or at home working on my journal and fleshing it out and all that, it's beautiful to think about it. Yeah, and you go back to the history and all the good stuff comes back, like is often said about any physical trauma, you forget the bad stuff. And it's true of those kind of trips too. And I find that the unpleasant episodes are an important part of the story, and of course I include them, but I hate to write them, I hate to revise them, I hate to reread them, because it forces me to engage all over again into that awful experience of having a drunken soldier point a gun at me, or, you know, writhing in bed with stomach cramps and dysentery. I hate to live them again, so I hate to reread them, and I hate to revise them, but of course it's one of the little birth pangs of writing a book, I guess.
You write at the end of the book about your arrival back in Paris and the sheer joy of the material world and your ability to consume at will.
Yes, and everyone else's ability too, it must be pointed out. It wasn't at all a selfish thing. It was gloriously universal. I was looking around at all these people. They were riding on the bus, and they weren't all crammed, you know, 35 people into a bus that holds 15. They were all sitting on the bus like dignified human beings, and people driving by and walking by with pride and freedom, and not having guns pointed at them, and not being stopped every 2 blocks and asked why they're carrying a camera or anything like that. So that was a glorious thing, and looking in the windows and seeing things people could buy and people that could buy them. And it came down to the mundane, most trivial little things, souvenirs. You know, I would look at souvenir Eiffel Towers and go, I could buy that if I wanted. I mean, it was just this complete return to the familiar world, I guess, in which every little trinket was precious.
It's almost politically incorrect to admit to that.
Well, yes, but it's also politically incorrect to take the romance out of a place like West Africa and to say that, yes, it's nice you can go to a village and not hear any sound but conversation. And that is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, there isn't a doctor for 100 miles. You know, the nearest clean water is 3 miles away. I mean, you have to come down and little children with their eyes running with pus and blind and their parents begging you for medicine. I mean, these are the realities that force you to confront both and make you come back valuing everything so preciously and not wanting to hear petty complaints about everyday
And not
life.
sort of dismiss this materialism as something that is just an indulgence.
Yeah, I mean, materialism is the medicine that would restore that little baby's sight, you know, and that their father or mother is begging me for that medicine as if I were a doctor, and I have to explain to them in laboring French that, sorry, I'm a bicycle rider, not a doctor, and I have nothing to help.
You
Wishing
had
that I could.
this wonderful description at one point about how, you know, and not sort of idolizing some of these situations you're in where, you know, to some people, many people, a Stradivarius would simply be firewood.
Kindling for the fire, yeah.
And that, you know, the works of the great thinkers just to get the fire going.
It's a part of the reward of traveling in those places is putting your values back in sync. And on one group, we had a saying one time, the decline of Western values, and it was our catchphrase every day. You know, no matter what low we were brought to and where we would sleep or what we would eat or what we would drink, it was the joke. You know, here's the decline of Western values. I had 2 warm Coca-Colas at 6:30 in the morning because that's all there was for breakfast. You know, it's all I could find. That becomes, you know, it's in some ways it's inconceivable from a home point of view, but when survival's at stake, and if you can get a crust of bread and a warm pop, you'll take it.
Yeah. I'm assuming that because Russia's been so successful and 30 million albums have been sold, that you've got a fair amount of pocket change here, that you're not
yeah,
starving.
I have a privileged life too, which is another reason I'm glad to exchange that for.
So that really is part of that.
I want to keep my values straight. You know, I come from a non-privileged background, and I do want to hold on to those values and not be warped by it. And it's been one of my problems for all of us. We all come from normal neighborhoods, you know, and normal families, and we really do value that, and we've helped each other, fortunately. Being a group, we've been able to help each other stay in line and not go spinning off on those tangents. But at the same time, travels like this help me to keep in mind what really matters. And if you spend all day looking for water, that's how your life might be spent.
You describe yourself as apolitical. Can you describe your values, though?
Human life, to me, is the fundamental value of all, and that's why I get impatient with some of the things that I see in places like this with misguided foreign aid, where they're spending time and money buying people religious tracts and teaching them how to read religious tracts instead of digging a well, instead of helping bring the ointment for that little girl so her eyes can be disinfected, you know? These are the things that I want to see done, and I come home all militant about trying to get them done, and I run into walls, or simple things like family planning, where a lot of Islamic countries or certain ethnocentric countries, they consider it a white plot, a Western plot, to introduce any kind of birth control or family planning into those countries. They think you're just trying to eradicate the black race. But when you go there and see all the little girls lined up at the water tap to gather water, and all of the little boys all the same age, because more than half the country is under 14 years old, you have to be stung by that from the values of basic human life. And because we, as Western aid providers, have brought clean water to a lot of these villages, and certainly that's an admirable thing, what should you do? Like I said, it's better to bring that than a religious tract or build a church. But at the same time, because there's clean water, more children survive. But the parents haven't quite adjusted to that, so they keep having more children. So where in Mali, for instance, 2 children out of 5 used to survive, now it's more like 4 out of 5. But they still keep having as many children. But if you try to get active in those areas and saying, look, you people, you know, you really, I hate to see your children suffer, and I wish they didn't have to. Do you want to consider contraception? And you just can't. It becomes a racist plot and an anti-religious plot and all kinds of bad things politically that you can't deal with.
I take it you're a little annoyed with organized religion these days.
Politics too. Again, it's the apolitical aspect. For me, I want people to be happy. I want people to be healthy. Those are my values, and there's nothing more important than that. Religion is not more important than life. Politics are not more important than life to me. And when I see these people suffering or their children suffering, I don't want it to be that way. You know, I want to do something worthwhile to help.
Neil Peart is our guest tonight. He has just authored The Masked Rider about his adventure travels through Africa. And of course, his band Rush has a new album out to Test for Echo. We'll continue our conversation right after this break. Neil Peart is our guest tonight. He is the drummer with Rush, the latest album, Test for Echo, and of course he is here tonight also as an author. His book on cycling through West Africa is entitled The Masked Rider. You say that one of your heroes, or one of the people you love to read, is Hemingway. Is there a connection there with travel, with adventure?
I think a shared fascination for the natural world as well as the civilized world, and
Yeah.
human nature certainly was one of his main themes of how people behave, and you know, maybe why. But he's just one among many, really.
And you drag along the philosophers with you to read, and
Oh, it's ironic that on a tour of that nature, there's not a lot of time to read, but what there is really high grade, because
Yeah.
you're lying in a dark hut with a flashlight on your shoulder, and the phone's not going to ring, and the TV's not going to be on. It's just going to be really good reading. Or if you take a siesta during the heat of the day, it's just high quality reading time. So I tend to choose something more serious that might give me a headache at home, or
Yeah.
might just make
so
it.
what did you read?
On this particular one, I took along Aristotle's Ethics, and then the letters of Vincent van Gogh to entertain me at night, sort of serious daytime reading. And something more lyrical, more romantic for the evenings.
And what did you conclude, having read Ethics?
Well, having been a careful choice, it was a good choice, but because you don't want to carry too many books, because anything you're carrying with you, of course, is weight that you have
and
to
it
move.
is quite compact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to choose 2 books that would hopefully get me through the trip, along with reading any literature on the area. And again, there isn't a lot of time, and you're pretty tired at the end of the day, so you tend not to read for long before you fall asleep. But they were just perfect choices. One of them, very romantic flights of Vincent's struggles with art, and the other, Aristotle's clarifications of ethical behavior.
You do talk and write about sort of experimenting with or trying to embrace other thinking styles than our rather kind of linear approach,
Sure.
and how we all try to deal with
Or
the
mine,
world.
anyway. I think even
Yeah.
you can't even generalize about Western people, because I see so many different patterns of thought among people that I encounter.
So explain what some of these thinking styles are that you're experimenting with.
Yeah, the broadest extreme would be the African one, where the oral tradition is often glorified without being understood what it really means. The griot is the name of the storyteller in a local village, for instance, but the average person you'll encounter in an African village might be illiterate, but they'll speak 6 languages, and not dialects. They'll speak English, French, and 4 separate African languages, because language is what's important. And they never did have writing, so reading and writing was really a non-issue. But they had someone in that village who could recite the entire genealogy of everyone, their entire mythology, all the way back through all their books of what would be their Bible, and their creation myths are so complex and so interwoven and so laden with symbols, and just as deep as any of ours, but because they're carried in the oral tradition, we either romanticize that
Right.
as the storytellers, or we diminish it as being some illiterate gibberish. And both are wrong. It's a completely separate way of existing. And it's one reason I like to pour myself into that, because first of all, I'm struck dumb by the number of geniuses around me who can speak 6 languages without being able to write their names. And that impresses me, because I've struggled just to master English and to at least
Grasp French.
grasp
Yeah.
French and speak
Yeah.
it in a survival level, at least. So that's very impressive. But when you do encounter these people who can tell these stories and recite all this stuff chapter and verse, you have to realize there's a different mode of thought at work here, and a different way of thinking, of observing the world, of measuring time. And again, Westerners are always making fun of Africans for being non-specific about time.
Right.
Well, it's not laziness or lack of punctuality or lack of consideration or any of our Western
They just don't
constructs.
have a Seiko
They
yet.
don't measure it that way. The sun comes up, that's the clock. The
Right.
sun goes down, the clock's off. You know, that's all there is to it. And if they say they're going to see you today, they'll see you today. You know, if they're going to do that today, they'll do it today, or today includes tomorrow. You know, it's just a completely different way of existing and of measuring life and of looking at life, and it's valuable to you or to any of us, I think, to try to understand it.
How do you use that, though, in your real life? When you come back, you have family, you've got commitments, you're on tour, you've got to meet deadlines when you're writing your book, you've got to be in the recording session. I mean, it's wonderful to kind of think about that, but how does it...
And I don't want to change my life either. I like that.
Yeah.
I like having a lot of things going on all the time. I like having deadlines. I like working to deadlines. I like being punctual. I like other people to be punctual.
Yeah.
I like it being easy to get from one place to another. I like there not being armed guards between Toronto and Montreal for the existing time at least, and you know, things like that, that Africa is a separate reality in every possible way. But I like to come home with that, and what it does is it allows me to prioritize, and sometimes I'll realize that it's good not to look at the clock, and if I have a bit of time off, I'll take my watch off and put it away and try to live by the sun. And if I've got an appointment that suddenly is dispensable, I say, well, never mind that, I'm going to hang out with my daughter instead, or read this book instead, or just go down in the basement and play drums.
How old is she? How old is your daughter?
18.
18. And what does she think of Dad sitting in the basement playing his drums?
Well, the joke is that she's a great natural player of the flute, and she never practices, and yet impresses her teacher like crazy every week. And I have to practice. I'm the opposite kind, where it's only my hard work that rewards me with improvement. So she's always, you know, teasing me for having to practice when she's naturally gifted, and I'm always bugging her to go practice. I don't have to practice. My teacher thinks I'm great.
But are they also yelling at you? I mean, I guess my worst nightmare would be living in the house with a drummer.
Well, it's never been a very popular thing, and unfortunately, you know, people are glad to listen to a piano echoing across the lake, but not drums. So it's an antisocial thing for some reason, which personally I don't understand, because I love the sound of drums. But truly, of course, I do understand. But I practice in the daytime down in the basement, so it really doesn't bother anybody.
I want to hear some of your music, and none of the videos are out from the new album, the Test for Echo album, but we do have one from Counterparts, the album in '93, and a song entitled Nobody's Hero, and you do the lyric writing for this group.
Yes.
What's it about?
Like most things, it's about a whole lot of things. I was trying to come to grips with what a hero really was, you know, as opposed to what our society makes one into. So I chose the sports heroes, of course, and the celebrity darlings of Hollywood and TV and that. And I thought, is that really a hero? And I thought, no, a hero is the guy who brings down the crippled airplane, or solves the mystery of a wasting disease, or pulls the child from the raging river in flood. You know, these are real heroes who, again, my highest value is human life. So people that directly affect human lives, those are heroes to me. So I wanted to try to grasp what that meant, but at the same time, there were certain people in my life who had a heroic stance. And one of them was the first gay man I ever knew. And I lived in England when I was about 18 and worked alongside him in shops in Carnaby Street. And it was my first introduction to the whole world. And he would invite me to his parties, just as the song said, you know, and I would be, you know, one of one or two straight people there. But it introduced me to this whole, you know, beautiful world that I really liked. And I didn't feel threatened by it or anything, because I hadn't been acculturated to be that way. And it changed, obviously, my whole outlook on the culture, the gay culture, if you like, for the rest of my life. You know, I would never have a chance of being homophobic. And in fact, every time I thought of gay people after that, I thought of this friend Ellis. And then just a few years ago, of course, we lost touch over the years. I moved back to Canada, and I heard that he had died from AIDS. And I thought, oh, this is a tragedy of heroic proportions to me. And then there were other ones that I don't want to discuss personally, but the other people that around me who were directly involved in other tragedies on that kind of scale that just moved me in a personal way and occupied that heroic stature, I guess in the classical Greek sense of tragedy on a heroic scale, was another aspect of it that I wanted to address and get away from empty heroes and people that just look good or people that just play a game well. You know, this is not enough to me to be a hero. You have to change somebody's life.
Let's take a listen to Nobody's Hero, and you might just want to watch the drummer in this particular segment too. Peart and Rush. That was not from the new album. That was from Counterparts in 1993. Have you seen that lately?
I have not seen that lately, no.
You don't sit around at home watching the video?
No, ironically, videos I usually see once when they're finished and somebody says, what do you think of this? I think it's fine. Boom, off it goes, you know. And the music, ironically, sometimes you never listen to it for 15 or 20 years. We've been in rehearsals lately for a tour and kind of thinking about songs we haven't played for a while that we might bring back for our entertainment as much as for the audiences. And there were ones that we would bring out and go, hey, that's pretty good. Yeah, I like that. And there was one from 15 years ago that we had never played live, ever. Just by circumstances, we'd chosen other songs from that album to play at the time, and it just got overlooked. And it was a 9-minute piece, too, so pretty complex, but it happened to tie into modern technology of art. It was called natural science.
Right.
It was about that science is the same as nature. If we're going to survive, we got to tame it. We had to survive, we had to tame nature, of course, to have shelter over our heads and have fire to warm ourselves by, and science is going to have to be the same. So that was the theme, and it's very timely now, as it was then. So,
it's amazing how some of those things
so we brought it back for the current tour, and we really liked it. So
Neil Peart is our guest tonight. The new album, Test for Echo by Rush, is just been released, as has his new book, The Masked Rider. We'll continue our conversation right after this. Neil Peart of Rush is with us tonight. He's the author of a new book, The Masked Rider. Now you are, as you were just describing, getting ready to launch another tour. And you have gone out to take drum lessons?
Well, it actually started about 2 years ago, actually
Yeah.
exactly 2 years ago now, that it happened through the process when I made the Buddy Rich tribute, and I was able to work with about 20 of the finest drummers in the world on that. But one of them, Steve Smith, I'd known for quite a few years, and I suddenly saw an incredible growth in his playing musically, not in technique or
Yeah.
paradiddles or anything like that, but just a beautiful musical gift to the music he was playing. And I asked him his secret, and his one-word answer was Freddie. So I was thinking, well, I've been playing for 30-odd years, and there are certain things that I don't know how to do and would like to, and so on. So I thought I'd try it, and I spent a couple of weeks in New York studying with this teacher. It's a 70-year-old man who grew up in New York of the 40s, of course, the magic jazz era,
Yeah.
of all the speakeasies and after-hour clubs, and a very burgeoning, very vital music scene at the time. And then found his vocation in teaching, and for the last 40 years has devoted himself to teaching, such that, and his students have been with him always for years, because he's more like what a tennis coach would do. He doesn't teach you notes or beats.
He brings it out of
He
you.
watches you move
Yeah.
and tells you how you might move better.
It is about that.
It's
like
about physical grace. And the first couple lessons, he would stand in front of me and do a soft shoe dance and say, look, where's this happening? In the air. And piano, does it happen on the table? No, it happens in the air. Violin, it's the bowing, it happens in the air. Why not worry about what happens in the air? I mean, hitting the drum, that hit is a tiny little part of that motion.
Yeah.
And same with your feet and your whole body. So he got me thinking in terms of that integrated circularity, getting everything moving smoothly into another. And it worked so well, and it gave me an element that I've been looking for, fluidity in my playing.
There's also a lot that goes up in the air out of your hand. The sticks. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
you
just
know?
one of my risk factors, yeah.
What, you like to keep yourself on the edge?
Yeah, so toss a stick up in the air, you can never be sure you'll catch it, so I like that.
And you don't lose your focus. You're not worried about trying to catch it
I
as
choose a
opposed
place
to...
where it won't. You know, I don't want to affect the music, obviously, so I choose a place where if I miss it, I'll have time to grab another one.
That's... Now, we talked about this in one of the breaks, this notion of the three of you, of a trio. Your family is a group of three.
Mm-hmm.
Rush, I mean, 22 years, this group of three. Is there a special dynamic there that...
I certainly feel that there is, and all of my earlier groups were 5-member groups, 4-member groups, which obviously didn't survive, but apart from that, they would tend to factionalize, and if it was a group of 4 or a group of 5, they would split up into 3 guys against 2, or, you know, it would always be this division, where in 3, it's very hard to do that. If it's 2 on 1, then it's likely the third is going to get kicked out and there'll be someone else. But it just seems it's limited enough that you can, for instance, have a completely collaborative relationship where we do. There's no one songwriter, so there's no jealousy, there's no envy factor of, you write all the songs, I want to write some songs, which tears a lot of groups apart.
Yeah.
You'd be very surprised how envy is a motor of destruction in that respect. So in our case, it doesn't happen. The other 2 collaborate on the music, and I contribute the lyrics, so all of us feels equally involved. We all co-produce each other. You know, I judge Geddy's bass parts, he judged my drum parts, and it's just a beautiful...
And how do you resolve a fight if you get mad at one of the 2? Have you learned, have you found ways?
Yes, same as in any relationship, you have to ask yourself in your own mind, is this worth breaking up over? Is this worth the band breaking up? I'm really mad. Should I go start this fight, or should I just shut up and resolve it, or try to discuss it in a more dignified way? So we've learned over the years that when we criticize with dignity and with respect, so that if I don't like the other 2 guys play a piece of music for me and I don't really understand where it's coming from, I don't say, that's garbage, what are you guys, crazy? You know,
Yeah.
you say, well, you know, I see what you're trying to get, but I don't quite see what the missing link, so you try to constructively help. And with lyrics the same way, if the guys don't understand what I'm trying to say, then I know I have a problem. I have a problem as a
Is it
communicator.
easier to do that when you're famous or harder?
Probably harder. Again, in the envy factor, and the people get stuffed up with self-importance, and they, how dare you criticize my work? And I know a lot of people are that way, that everything they do is great, and that's the end, obviously, when you get to that stage. And a friend of mine, Ben Minkoff, said they need an insultant, someone just to come and say, look, everything you do is not great.
We'll take a short break, come back with some final thoughts from Neil Peart tonight. Neil Peart is our guest tonight, the drummer with Rush, the author of a new book, The Masked Rider. 2 questions about, I guess, religion and spirituality. When you were a kid at 15, you wrote, God is dead on the ceiling of your bedroom, and your parents convinced you otherwise.
Well, no, they were just kind of appalled by, you know, I had a very religious grandmother, and what if, you know, her reaction is not to be imagined, and it was strictly ambivalence on my part. I didn't know any better. I didn't really care, and I had no idea that I was preaching Nietzsche. But, and when the objection was brought up, I just took the spray can, which we had in those days, and changed it to God Isn't Dead. And I was just as happy with that. I was the main issue to me, I was allowed to spray paint graffiti on my bedroom ceiling. I mean, that was the essence of freedom and self-expression.
At that age.
What I was saying at that age, I didn't know or care any better, so it just didn't matter.
I mean, you've also, in your time, been very powerfully affected by nuns, by religious music.
Young Catholic school students often say that. But yeah, there was an episode recounted in the book about staying at a monastery in Cameroon, and this was run by a Swiss church, French-speaking nuns, and they invited us as their guests to attend the Vespers service. And I've always been in love with the sound of Vespers, you know, and an evening service sounded really beautiful to me. A very romantic notion, so certainly I wasn't going to miss it. And I went to hear it, and it was a gorgeous thing in this echoing church, the voices of the nuns, and it was a mixture of Europeans and young African novitiates, or whatever they're called, you know, the sisters in study.
Yes.
And there was one, the priest sat back a few rows, and his bass voice filled them out, and one of the African sisters played guitar, and it was so glorious musically. And they were singing a psalm, ironically 102, I looked up later, which was a cry for help in the wilderness, which in the middle of a trip through Cameroon was not a bad bit of irony either. But the simple sound of the voices and the music moved me really profoundly, and just dredged up a lot of these thoughts about what religion had been to me, questioning as a youth, you know, 13, wondering, sitting at Sunday school singing Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam and all that, and really wondering, really, you know, is this true? And I wasn't a doubter, I was just, I guess I always say, no, I'm not a cynic, I'm a skeptic. I was just like, really? And that's always
the
my
literal
response
translation of some of these things.
Yeah. It matters, the difference matters to me, that I'm not a cynic in the sense I don't put things down before I understand them, but I'm skeptical that I won't embrace them before I understand them either, is how I perceive it.
Has that profoundly influenced the way you write?
I hope so. You know, I really want to have that balance where I don't embrace anything automatically, and I'll carefully investigate and try to understand it. What would make a person behave this way? What would make a group of people act this way? What makes religion possible? What makes politics possible? These are all enduring questions that are great fun to sit. When you're sitting on a bicycle for 10 hours a day, these are the luxuries that you have, and part of your profession too is being a songwriter. If you're sitting looking out the window, you can call it work. And it's one of the aspects of being a writer I really like, is reflection is part of the job. You know, it's not a luxury. For most people, it is a luxury, and it's what poets and songwriters and playwrights and authors ought to do for us.
You do a lot of your work and your preparation by yourself, like you rehearse without the group.
Yeah, that's just because I want to be good already before I get there, and I'll try to start writing lyrics before we get together because I want to have something to present. It's to me a part of professionalism that when the band starts rehearsing, I should be ready. So I'll start 2 weeks before. Now I practice every day anyway, but in previous years, if a tour was coming up, or before we go into the studio, I just love to be prepared. I love to practice. It doesn't bother me a bit to spend 2 weeks playing songs over and over again. It's my job, and I happen to like that part of it a lot. And if I don't have an audience there, it doesn't detract from me. It's still the challenge of performing it well and trying new things and making it fresh and making it good. It's endlessly rewarding.
In 5 seconds or less, we're almost out of time. Do you still love the road life, or do you resist it?
I resist it, but there are elements of it that I do like. Traveling around is nice. Art galleries around the world are nice, and playing the music is nice.
It's really lovely to meet you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank
for
you.
being with us tonight. Neil Peart, and I've said it right all night.
Every night.
Neil
Every
Peart,
time.
the new Rush album is Test for Echo, and his new book about cycling, literally on a bicycle through West Africa, The Masked Rider, is just about to hit the stands. And we didn't even talk about your motorcycle days. I gather you've progressed on now to the motorcycle.
Just trying different modes of transport.